That truck is a community eyesore, and as of this morning, it belongs to the lien yard. That was the first thing Renata Fox said to me, standing in the gravel at the mouth of my own driveway, in white slacks and a hot pink blazer, holding a clipboard against her chest like a shield. It was a Monday, a little after 7. My work truck was gone. The empty rectangle where it had sat for 11 years was still dark, with the oil it had dropped over those 11 years, and a small square of orange paper fluttered under a rock she had set on my gatepost. And Renata smiled at me the way a person smiles when they think the hard part is already over. I am Sully Vance. I am 58 years old. I fix and build heavy diesel equipment for a living, mostly fleet trucks and farm rigs. And I have owned 6 acres on the dead end of Quarry Bend Road for going on 20 years. My driveway is 400 feet of packed gravel running off the county lane. And it sits on a recorded access easement my parcel has carried since before the subdivision behind me was a subdivision, before the cul-de-sacs, before the entrance monument with the fake gas lamps. Before Renata Falk ever pinned a laminated badge to a blazer and called herself a president. What she did not know that Monday morning was that I had spent 30 years learning exactly how a tow happens. Who signs? Who is allowed to sign? What authority a wrecker has to be on a road? And what happens to that authority when the paper behind it has a hole in it? She thought she had taken my truck. What she had actually done was hand me the one thread I needed to pull. And I want you to ask yourself, if a woman you had never wronged hauled your work truck off your own deeded driveway and smiled about it, what would you have done? Let me back up, because the smile was years in the making, and you should see how it got built. When I bought the place, there was no association. There were 4 houses and a hayfield and an old man named Earl who ran cattle on the far side of the creek. The developer came in maybe 9 years back, bought Earl's hayfield, and put up 41 homes in 2 phases with a clubhouse and a retention pond they called a lake. They formed the HOA to run the common areas. My 6 acres were never part of it. My deed predates their plat. Their own recorded documents carve my parcel out by metes and bounds. And the access easement that feeds my driveway is named on their plat in plain language, granted to my parcel recorded at the county the year I was born. For the first 6 years, none of that mattered, because nobody pushed. The board was a retired surveyor and 2 tired women who wanted the pool cleaned. We waved across the road. I plowed the entrance for them one bad winter and would not take their $40. That was the neighborhood. Then Renata Falk bought the corner lot and ran for the board, and within a year she was president, and the neighborhood I knew started disappearing one notice at a time. She came at me sideways first. A letter on letterhead. She had clearly designed herself, informing me that my property was within the community's aesthetic jurisdiction, and that my fence, my equipment, and my commercial vehicle storage were out of compliance with community standards. I read it twice at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee going cold, and I did what a careful man does. I did not call her and yell. I pulled my deed, my plat, and the recorded easement, and I wrote one short letter back, certified. Return receipt, stating that my parcel is not a member of the association, is not subject to its covenants, and that any further notice should be addressed to my attorney. I kept a copy. I started a folder. That folder is the reason you are listening to this. Instead of a story about a man who lost his temper, the first notice was in the spring. By summer, she had decided the letter from me was a personal insult, which it was not. It was 4 sentences and a deed number, but a woman like Renata experiences a fact she cannot argue with as an attack on her character. The notices started coming monthly. My gravel was non-conforming surface material. My security light was light pollution, affecting community ambiance. My dog, a blue heeler named Dixie, who has never left my fence line in her life, was an unleashed nuisance animal. Each notice carried a fine I was not a member to owe, and each fine I photographed, dated, and filed, unpaid, with a one-line note clipped to it explaining why it was void. She papered me for a year, and I never paid a cent. And that, I think, is what made her start looking for a way to make me pay that did not need my signature. Here is the thing about Renata Falk that I did not understand until much later, and that you should hold in your mind as the staircase climbs. She was not only a busybody. A busybody is annoying. Renata had a motive with a $sign on it, and the $sign was parked behind a wrecker. The subdivision had a towing arrangement, the kind every HOA in the country has, where a company comes and pulls cars parked on the street overnight or in fire lanes. The company was Maddox Recovery, run by an older man named Carl Maddox out of a yard 2 miles down the county road. Standard outfit: 1 flatbed, 2 wheel lifts, a gravel lot, a German Shepherd, and a wall of keys. The arrangement let the board authorize tows from the common roads. It did not, anywhere in its language, authorize tows from private driveways on recorded easements, because no lawyer alive would write that, and no judge alive would uphold it. Renata had gotten Carl to sign an amended enforcement agreement. I learned this later. The amendment gave the association the authority to direct tows from any parcel within or adjacent to the community deemed in violation, and it gave the association a cut of every recovery fee. A kickback, dressed in letterhead. She had a financial interest in towing me, and she had a man with a flatbed who, for a piece of the fee, had agreed not to ask whether her authority reached my gravel. So, that Monday morning, the orange paper under the rock was not a fine. It was a notice that my abandoned commercial vehicle had been removed to a lean yard for endangering community safety and violating posted parking ordinance, and that the recovery and storage fees were accruing at a rate that would, within 30 days, exceed the value of the truck, and let the yard sell it at auction. She had not fined me. She had taken the asset and started a clock. I stood there in the gravel and I felt my heart go hard and slow in my chest, the way it does when the situation gets simple. I did not raise my voice. I have found that the calmer I get, the worse it goes for the other person, and I wanted it to go very badly for Renata Falk. "You towed my truck off my driveway," I said. "I had it removed from a fire lane," she said, "per the posted ordinance." "There is no fire lane on my property. There is no posted ordinance on my property. That is my recorded easement, and that was my truck on my gravel." She tapped her clipboard. "Mr. Vance, the community's jurisdiction is a settled matter. You can take it up at the next board meeting, or you can pay the recovery fee. The lot opens at 8. And she turned on a kitten heel that sank an inch into my gravel, and she walked back toward her car with the small, unsteady steps of a person who is dressed for a different terrain than the one she is standing on, and I let her go. I did not go to the lean yard at 8. I went inside, and I called my daughter. Pia is 31, an accountant, and she has my temper, which is to say none on the surface, and a great deal underneath. She picked up on the second ring because she always knows when something is wrong by the hour I call. "They took the truck," I said. There was a pause on the line. I could hear her set something down. "Off the driveway. Off the driveway." Renata signed it. there is a recovery clock running. And Pia, she had it removed, not impounded by the county. A private wrecker on a private contract she controls. Then she put her name on it, Pia said. My daughter does not waste words. Dad, she put her name on a toe off a recorded easement. That is not an HOA, fine. That is taking your property. That is your truck, taken, do not pay them a dime. Do not sign anything at that yard. I know, I said. I want to know who the wrecker is. Carl Maddox, she said, because she had grown up here too. Out on the county road. Why? I looked out the kitchen window at the empty rectangle of dark gravel. Because I want to know what he signed, and I want to know what it cost him to sign it. That was Monday. Tuesday morning, I drove out to Maddox, Recovery, in Pia's car, because mine was sitting behind a chain-link fence somewhere accruing storage. The yard was exactly what I expected, gravel and grease, and a shepherd that woofed once, and then decided I smelled like work and not like trouble. Carl Maddox came out of the office, wiping his hands on a rag. A big, slow man in his late 60s with a bad knee and an expression that changed the second he saw my face, because a man who has been doing the wrong thing knows the wronged man on sight. You're Vance, he said. I am. He looked at the ground. Your truck's in the back. I'm not supposed to release it without the fee. That's the agreement. I'm not here for the truck yet, I said. I'm here to understand the agreement. You towed it off my driveway, Carl. My driveway. Did you look at the plat? He worked the rag. She gave me an enforcement order. Said the board had authority over the road frontage. Said it was all squared with the county. It is not squared with the county. There is no county in this. It's a recorded easement, granted to my parcel. And you put a wrecker on it and took my property on the say-so of a woman who gets a cut of your fee. His face did a thing, then the thing a decent man's face does when the cover story he told himself out loud sounds worse than the truth he knew quietly. How'd you know about the cut, he said, and that was the whole confession right there in 5 words. I did not gloat. I told you I would not, and I meant it. I just stood in his yard with the shepherd leaning on my leg, and I said the thing I had decided to say on the drive. Over. Carl, how old are you? 67. What's that got to do with anything? Knee's bad. Shepherd's getting gray. You've got one flatbed that's older than my daughter, and a wall of keys you can't read half of anymore. How long were you planning to do this before you sold it and sat on a porch? He went quiet. A wrecker man does not get asked about his porch. He gets cussed at and he gets threatened, and he has answers ready for both. He did not have an answer for the porch. 2 years, he said finally. Maybe 1. What would you take for it, the whole thing? Trucks, the lot, the contracts, the business. Today's name on the door. He stared at me like I had spoken a different language. He set the rag down on the fender of the flatbed, and he leaned against the truck, and he was quiet for a long while, and I let the quiet do its work, because I have learned that a man will fill a silence with the truth if you give him enough of it. The shepherd sighed and lay down across both our boots. Somewhere behind the office a radio crackled and went still. Carl looked out at his lot, at the flatbed with the rust starting along the rocker, at the wall of keys in the window, where half the tags had faded to nothing, at the gravel he had raked for 30 years, and then, slow, he started to do the math behind his eyes. And I watched the man who had been my problem on Monday turn into the man who was my answer on Tuesday. You're serious, he said. It was not a question. It was a man checking the weight of a thing before he picked it up. I have never been more serious about anything that did not involve an engine. I said, "Think on it tonight. Don't release my truck to anybody. Don't run another call for that association until you hear from me. And Carl, keep your books exactly where they are. Don't tidy them. Don't lose a page. The shape they're in right now is the shape they need to stay in." He looked at me a beat longer than was comfortable, and I understood that he had heard the second meaning under the first, and that some part of him was relieved, because a man does not keep a copy of a signature card unless a part of him has been waiting all along for the day somebody asks to see it. That is the thread I told you about. That is what Renata Falk handed me when she smiled in my gravel. She had towed my truck using a company that was for sale, run by a tired man who wanted out, on a contract. She did not have the authority to write. And I am a man who fixes diesel equipment for a living and has spent 30 years putting money away because my late wife and I never trusted that anyone would catch us if we fell. My wife's name was Delphine. She died 4 years ago this fall, and she is the reason I have 6 acres and not a rented apartment, because she was the one who said, "Buy the land, Sully. Buy land you can stand on, paper you can hold." On Tuesday in Carl Maddox's gravel yard, I started thinking about how a man holds a whole company. Now I am going to step out of the story for one moment, and then I will get right back to it. If you have ever stood in your own yard and been told by someone in a costume that your yard is theirs to administer, you already know the feeling in my chest. You might want to see how this one turns. All right, back to it. I did not buy the company that Tuesday. You do not buy a business off a handshake in a gravel lot. And I am not reckless. I am methodical, which is slower and lands harder. What I did that Tuesday was tell Carl I was serious, get his number, and tell him not to release my truck to anybody and not to do another tow for the association until he heard from me. He agreed to both faster than I expected, and I understood why. A man who knows he has been doing the wrong thing is grateful to be given a reason to stop. I drove home and I called my attorney, a woman named Greer, who had handled my wife's estate, and I told her the whole thing, and I heard her start writing on her end of the line. 2 tracks, she said. Track 1, we get your truck back without you paying their fee, because they cannot lawfully charge you, and we put them on. Notice the tow was an unlawful taking off a recorded easement. Track 2, you said the company's for sale. A pause. Sully, do you understand what owning that company does to her? Tell me, I said, because I wanted to hear her say it. It gives you standing she can't argue with. Right now, you're a homeowner. She's harassing. And that's a long road through small claims. If you own Maddox Recovery, you own the contract, she amended. You own the records of every tow she ever ordered. You own the man who signed her kickback. And you become the party that decides whether the association ever gets a wrecker to answer its calls again. You stop being the person she's towing. You become the person she has to ask for a tow. Greer, let that sit. And you get every piece of paper that proves what she did. I want to be honest about the next stretch, because a man telling this story to look good would skip it. I did not do this in a weekend. Buying a small business right takes a few weeks even when both sides want it. The contested thing, though, the thing a man's whole grievance hangs on, that part moved fast, and here is how the week actually went, because she did not give me weeks to be patient. She gave me until Friday, and she did it to herself. Wednesday, the staircase climbed. Renata found out I had not paid the lien yard and had not come crawling, and she did what people like her do when the pressure they applied does not produce the collapse they expected. By Wednesday afternoon, there were 2 new notices in my mailbox. Hand-delivered, no postmark, which is its own small crime. The first declared my entire driveway a private roadway in violation of community right-of-way standards, and announced that the association would be installing compliant signage at the easement entrance. The second informed me that until I remediated, the association had authorized Maddox Recovery to remove any vehicle staged on the non-compliant roadway, which meant Pia's car, which meant any truck a customer of mine left in my own yard, which meant she had decided to point a wrecker at my driveway as a standing threat. She did not know I had already talked to the wrecker. Wednesday evening, she escalated again. And this one I have on video, because by then I had a camera on my gate, and you should know, I am the kind of man who, the day after his truck disappears, puts a camera on his gate. She drove up the county lane in her white sedan and stopped at the mouth of my driveway and got out with a post hole digger she clearly did not know how to use, and a stack of metal signs, and she started trying to plant one in the dirt of my easement on my property 14 feet inside my recorded line. I have the survey pins. I know where 14 feet is. I walked down the gravel with Dixie at my heel, and I did not say a word until I was standing on my side of nothing, because it was all my side. That's my ground, I said. This is the community's right-of-way, she said, breathing hard from the digger, a smudge of dirt on the hot pink sleeve. And I am authorized to mark it. You're authorized by yourself. You're 14 feet inside a recorded easement that belongs to my parcel, planting a sign for a company that's about to have a very interesting Friday. I had not meant to say the last part. It came out flat and certain, and I watched it land. She did not understand it. She filed it away as a bluff. People who have never built anything assume everyone else is bluffing too. You'll be towed, she said. Your daughter's car, your customers, all of it, until you comply. Renata, I said, and I used her first name on purpose because I wanted her to hear that I was not afraid of her title. Go home. Take your sign. You're about to find out what it costs to point a wrecker at a man who knows wreckers. She left the sign in the dirt at a drunken angle and drove off, and I pulled it out of my ground with one hand and set it in the bed of Pia's car as evidence. And that night, I called Greer and Carl both, and I moved the timeline up. Thursday is when the floor opened under her, and she still did not feel it, because that is how this kind of thing works. The person standing on the trap door is always the last to know. Thursday morning, Greer and I and Pia sat at Carl Maddox's kitchen table, 2 miles down the road, and went through his books. I had brought Pia because she reads a set of books the way I read a blown-head gasket, fast and without flinching. What we found in Carl's records was worse for Renata than I had hoped, and exactly as bad as I had feared on her behalf. Every tow the company had done for the association in the last 14 months was logged, with the date, the address, the authorizing signature, and the fee split. And there it was in Carl's own ledger, in his own slow hand. A line item every month, marked association share, paid by check, to an account that was not the association's operating account. It was a side account. It had Renata's name on the signature card. Carl had a copy of the signature card because his bookkeeper had asked, once, who he was making the second check out to. And Carl, being the kind of careful that men get after 60 years, had kept the answer. Pia walked it with a pencil. She is good at this in a way I am not, the same way I am good at finding the one cracked injector in a bank of 8. She put the recovery invoices in one stack, and the association's posted dues records in another, and she ran a finger down both. And where the two should have met, they did not. The fees the neighbors paid at the lien window went into Maddox's recovery and came back out as the association share, and the association share went into the side account, and the side account never once touched the community's audited books. 14 months, 41 homes, a few $100s here, 1,100 there. A steady small theft that nobody felt because nobody was ever shown the whole column at once. She kept it small on purpose, Pia said, tapping the ledger. No single number big enough to make anybody go looking. That's the part that tells you she knew. A careless thief takes a lump, a careful one takes a trickle. She closed the book. She's careful, Dad. She had not been skimming for the board. She had been skimming for herself. The kickback did not even go to the association she claimed to serve. It went to Renata Falk. Ta. Psath. Pia set down the ledger and looked at me. And she did not smile, because we are not smilers. But something moved behind her eyes that I had not seen since before her mother died.
Dad,
she said quietly. She didn't just tow your truck. She's been running a tow racket off the whole subdivision and pocketing the cut. Every neighbor who ever got pulled out of the visitor lot at 2 in the morning paid her personally. And didn't know it. I know, I said. This isn't your fight anymore. This is 41 houses. I know that too, I said. Which is why I'm going to own the company that holds the proof, so it can't disappear. That afternoon, Thursday afternoon, I bought Maddox Recovery. We did it properly, with Greer drawing the purchase, an asset sale, the trucks and the lot and the business name and the contracts and the records, all of it, signed and notarized at a title office in town with Carl's wife crying happy tears about Arizona. I paid him fairly. I will not say the number because the number is between Carl and me and my late wife's careful years, but I paid him what the thing was worth, to a man who wanted his porch, and I paid him a little more for the dignity of being the one who got to make the call I was about to make. The first thing I did, as the new owner of the wrecker, Thursday at 4 o'clock, was send the association a single letter on my new letterhead, drafted by Greer, signed by me as owner. It said 3 things, plainly. 1. The company was under new ownership effective today. 2. The enforcement agreement amendment purporting to authorize tows from private parcels and easements was void, as beyond the association's authority and beyond the contractors, and we would honor no such direction. 3. The records of all prior tows authorized by the association, including the fee allocations and the account they were paid into, were being preserved and copied to County Council and to the association's own members, who, as paying members, had a right to their own books. I did not mention my truck in the letter. My truck was a small thing now. My truck was already back in the empty rectangle of dark gravel where it belonged, because the second thing I did as owner was drive my own flatbed to my own lean yard and load my own truck and bring it home. And there is a particular feeling to towing your own stolen truck back onto your own driveway with your own wrecker that I am not going to be able to describe to you well enough. So I will just tell you that Dixie barked at it the whole way up the gravel, like it had been gone to war. Friday is when she found out. I had thought honestly that it would take the weekend. I had imagined Renata getting the letter Friday and stewing through Saturday and calling a lawyer Monday. I had underestimated how fast a thing falls once the bottom is gone. Renata Falk did not stew quietly. Renata Falk, on Friday morning, called a wrecker. She had a vehicle she wanted towed. I do not know whose, and it does not matter, because the only wrecker contracted to her community was mine now. And the call came into the office where I was sitting at Carl's old desk learning the radio. and the woman who had taken those calls for 15 years put the line on hold. She wants a tow at Quarry Bend. She's asking for it on the association account. I want you to picture this with me because the whole story sits inside one phone call. The woman who towed my truck off my own driveway on Monday was, on Friday, calling me to ask me to tow a truck for her. She did not know it was me. The account was the same account. The wrecker was the same wrecker. Only the owner had changed. And she had not read her mail. I took the call. I want to be clear that I did not gloat, and I did not say one cruel word, because the document was about to speak, and I have never needed to talk over a document in my life. Maddox, recovery, I said. Yes, this is Renata Falk, president of the Quarry Bend Community Association. I need a removal at the Vance parcel. The commercial vehicle is back on the non-compliant roadway, and I'm authorizing the tow under our enforcement agreement. She rattled it off, fast and sharp, the way she said everything. A woman reading her own authority off the inside of her skull. Ma'am, I said, this is the owner. We're not able to perform that tow. A pause. Excuse me. The agreement obligates you to respond to board-authorized removals. I'm the board president, and I'm authorizing it. The agreement you're referring to was amended to claim authority over private parcels, I said. That amendment is void. It was void when it was signed. We sent the association written notice yesterday. And ma'am, the parcel you're trying to tow from is mine. The line went quiet. I could hear her breathing change. I could hear, in the silence, the exact moment a person realizes the floor they have been stamping their foot on is not a floor. "Who is this?" she said, and her voice had dropped its sharpness and gone thin. "Sully Vance," I said. "I bought the company yesterday. The truck you towed Monday is back on my driveway, where my deed says it belongs. The signs you tried to plant are out of my ground. And the records of every tow you ever ordered and the account you had the fees paid into, the one with your name on the signature card and not the association's, those are with county council as of yesterday afternoon and with your own members as of this morning. I let one breath go by. You should probably go home, Renata. I think your neighbors are going to want to talk to you about their books." She hung up. She did not say another word. I did not need her to. Here's the part I want to slow down on, because it is the part that matters more than the phone call, and it is the part the angry version of this story always forgets. What undid Renata Falk was not my money. Money got me the company, yes, but money is not why she lost. She lost because 41 families had paid a fee for 14 months that they were told went to community enforcement and actually went into a personal account. And the moment those families could see their own books, the thing she had built on the assumption that nobody would ever check, collapsed under the simple weight of people checking. By Friday afternoon, the copies Greer had sent to the association membership had done what copies do. A man named Okonkwo, who lived 3 doors from the clubhouse and had been towed twice from his own visitor lot and made to pay both times, called an emergency meeting of the members under a clause in the association's own bylaws. A retired bookkeeper, 2 streets over, had already matched the side account to the recovery fees by Saturday. The county council's office, which Greer knew well, and which is staffed by exactly the kind of constrained, careful public servants this kind of story needs and almost never gets to show, opened a file the following Monday, not against me, not against the neighbors. And they were neither corrupt nor heroic. They were simply people who, once the verified facts were in front of them, did their jobs. I went to the members' meeting the following Tuesday, not as a combatant, but because they asked me to, as the new owner of the wrecker, and the man whose truck had started it. I want to tell you what that room was like. Because the relief was not loud and it was not cruel. And that is exactly why it was complete. Renata was there. She had come to defend herself. And I will give her this. She did not run. She stood up in her hot pink blazer in a room of her own neighbors, and she defended herself hard. She said the side account was a transitional, administrative arrangement. She said the easement was ambiguous. She said the toes were within the spirit of community standards. She fought. She mounted the kind of active, fast-talking, paper-waving defense that a person who has been winning arguments by volume her whole life mounts when the volume stops working. She was not a cartoon. She was a real person who had built a real little machine for taking money from her neighbors, and she defended it like it was real, because to her it was. And it did not matter, because by then the room had the books. Okonkwo stood up with a single page, the bank's signature card, and he did not yell. He just held it up and asked her, in front of everyone, whose name was on it. And Renata, who had a fast answer for everything, who had a fast answer for me and my own gravel on Monday, did not have a fast answer for that. Because there is no fast answer when your own signature is the document and the document is speaking, and you have spent your whole career. The members voted her off the board that night. Not out of cruelty. They voted her off because the bylaws said a board member who misappropriated funds was removed, and the book said she had, and that was the end of the argument. The county matter went its own slow way after that, and the side account was frozen, and the fees that could be traced were ordered returned to the members who had paid them, and I am told Renata sold the corner lot before the next spring, and moved somewhere with a different set of neighbors who did not yet know her. I did not follow her. A man who chases the loser past the finish line is just a different kind of bully, and I had no interest in being one. My truck sat in the rectangle of dark gravel where it had always sat. The signs went to the dump. The easement is still recorded, still mine by name, still older than the subdivision, still older than her idea of herself. And the company I bought on a Thursday to win a fight on a Friday, I still own it. I kept Carl's dispatcher, and I hired 2 young men, and I bought a newer flatbed. And the German Shepherd retired to my porch and made an uneasy peace with Dixie that holds as long as nobody touches the other one's bowl. The trucks still answer for the subdivision. The board, a new board, a board of people who read their own bylaws, now calls when somebody parks across a hydrant, and we send a flatbed, and the fee goes to the company, all of it on the books, where Pia can see it. Carl sends a postcard from Arizona every few months. The last one said the porch was everything he'd hoped, and that his knee liked the dry heat, and that he'd heard about the meeting and was sorry he ever signed that amendment, and I wrote him back one line. The same line I will give you now, because that line is the whole lesson. Here it is, plain. The way my wife would have wanted it said. Hold your paper, walk your lines, know where your survey pins are, and know who is allowed to sign what, because the person in the costume is counting on you not knowing. And the costume is the only thing they actually own. A deed older than the claim wins. A license without authority is just a laminated card. The records always tell the truth eventually, and the people who keep records are the people who win the slow, quiet way without ever raising their voice. If somebody in a blazer tells you your own ground belongs to them, do not argue with them in the driveway. Go inside. Pull your deed. Start a folder. The folder is the fight. You do not need money to do this. And I want to say that clearly, because the part where I bought the whole company makes a good story, but it is not the lesson. I had savings because my wife was careful, and the company was for sale And those two things lined up the way they sometimes do. Most of the time, the win is smaller and quieter than that. Most of the time, the win is just the certified letter, the kept copy, the deed held up at the right moment to the right neutral pair of eyes. Buying the wrecker was the loud version of a quiet truth, and the quiet truth is the one I want you to keep. Keep your records. They are stronger than any blazer. If this story put a little steel in your spine or reminded you to go find your own deed and read it tonight, then it did its job, and I would be glad to know it sat right with you. There are more of these because there are always more. Because there is always someone who mistakes a clipboard for a deed. The next one, I will tell you, is about a woman who was fined $11,000 for the color of a barn that had stood on her grandfather's land for 60 years before the association existed. And what she found in the county archive that turned the whole thing around in a single afternoon. Until then, walk your lines, hold your paper, and keep your dog close. I went out that evening, after the meeting, after all of it, and I stood in the gravel where Renata Falk had stood on that first Monday morning and smiled. The light was going gold over the pasture. My truck ticked as it cooled. Dixie leaned her whole weight against my leg the way she does when the day is finally over, and I put my hand down on her head, and the two of us stood there on my 400 feet of packed gravel and watched the dark come up out of the creek bottom, and not one thing on that ground belonged to anybody but me.